Hello and welcome to the Future Food Institute Food for Earth Day 2021. This is a global torch relay for positivity, goodness, and hope pertaining to the future of food. We have about a 45-minute roundtable discussion here with a few different food thought leaders, entrepreneurs, scientists from around the world. And we are going to discuss what gives us hope for the future of food. So I'd like to bring up the three panelists here. The first one is Donegal Felice Markegard. She is a grass-fed beef researcher, rancher, and researcher, land steward from the Markegard Family Ranch. Welcome, Donegal. So nice to have you. Thank you for your time. Also, we have Andrea Barcelli, one of my favorite Italians. He's a psychologist and neuroscientist. And he is in my understanding, quantifying and qualifying our connectedness with nature, and a biophiliac. Welcome, Andrea. And last but not least, the one and only Rob Trice, who is one of the most connected men in the Silicon Valley, California, actually really global food tech, ag tech ecosystem. He is founding partner at Better Food Ventures and the Mixing Bowl Hub. Welcome, Rob. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. So my name is Tim West. I'll be your host, cat herding this wonderful conversation of all of the things that are giving us hope. I'm a slow food chef turned social entrepreneur and co-founder of the Future Food Institute. But really, at the end of the day, I'm a student of the food system and a collector of really great people doing great things in the world. So I'm honored to be able to join you and to be tapped by Sarah Reversi from Future Food to talk about our theme today pertaining to this future food of regeneration, nature tech, and biophilia. So in rough order, I'm going to ask each of our panelists here to speak to these themes, but we may have a bunch of conversations back and forth. So anybody welcome to jump in whenever. Donegal, I'd love to start with you and kind of invite you to give us a little bit of your background, how you arrived at your work, and speak to this theme of regeneration. Please, the stage is yours.
Great. Thank you, Tim. It's an honor to share the stage with all of you. And my background is in wildlife tracking, permaculture, and wilderness survival. But that really has led me to my current work, which is a regenerative rancher here in the California coast. We graze grass-fed beef, grass-fed lamb, pasture-raised pork, and pasture-raised chicken on 11,000 acres of coastal grasslands. And we do this through regenerative agriculture so that there is more life that is produced with this form of ranching. And it's really ranching in nature's image and how the prairie would be grazed and how the prairie evolved with grazing animals. So the reason why I got into this was because I talk about it in my memoir, my first memoir, Dawn Again, Tracking the Wisdom of the Wild. I was what you might call an at-risk youth, runaway teenager, and I found the wilderness because I was searching for something, searching for meaning in a very disconnected world. And I wanted to connect with myself, and I did that by connecting with nature. So I spent time, going out with just a pocket knife and making a shelter, gathering food, and alone, tracking animals, collecting wild plants, and immersing in my senses. And so when we immerse in our senses, and I think Andrea will speak more to this, and we're immersed in nature, then we were able to absorb so many different signals and connect to sort of that sacred silence that's within us all. So by connecting with nature, inherently it brings about a curiosity for life, a curiosity for connection and relationships. And often that curiosity leads to a passion, that you're passionate about something. And that passion leads to a greater vision of how we can all play a role in the larger ecology and framework of this incredible planet that we're celebrating today. So I learned about regenerative agriculture from that place of immersion. I would spend my summers in my youth tracking wolves in the largest tract of wilderness in the lower 48 states. And it was on one occasion where I was following an alpha wolf, and he led me to a rendezvous site where the pack had gathered, and they were feeding on a bull elk that they had just taken down. And it was one of those experiences that you'll remember the rest of your life, because the hair on the back of my neck was standing up, and I just felt so alive from connecting with that wolf and being immersed in that wilderness alone, and also sort of on that edge of fear, and being able to surrender to that trust that I was going to be okay. And so it was this rendezvous site that really taught me about that relationship of predator and prey, that when the predators move through a landscape, they're moving the herds of the prey animals. So in this case, it was the elk. The herds of elk would move from meadow to meadow, and the wolves would follow them and take down one wolf or take down one elk and feast on that elk. But after the elk had moved through, it was like the meadow had become alive. They had trampled the plants. They had left their saliva. They had wallowed. They had sort of hydrated the landscape, like this dance of prey and plants. And this has actually been studied extensively in Yellowstone National Park. It's called the trophic cascade, where when a predator comes into a landscape, in that case the wolf, then everything moves. So the predator moves the prey. So instead of the elk hanging around those riparian areas and just grazing in one spot, and sort of becoming lazy, those predators move those animals. And then in turn, the plants really thrive. And what they saw was the songbirds came back and the beaver came back. So that is really what brought me to my work today, is that I found that the way nature functions creates all this life. And we've really messed things up. But if we can take our place and start to tend to that wild and work with nature and let her then regenerate, because that's what she's really good at. That's what Mother Earth is really good at, is regeneration. And so it's not enough just to walk away, because we belong here too, and we have a place. So after I realized that the predator moving those elk and moving those prey species were vital to the health of not only that elk population, but also all of the plants and all of the species. And when that ecology is in place, then there's biodiversity, there's abundance of life, and there's species that come back and flourish. So there's no ecologically intact ecosystem devoid of animals. So if we're going to practice regenerative agriculture and we're going to talk about mimicking nature, then we need to immerse ourselves and really understand nature and be a part of nature and understand our role. So that's why I always tell people that the foundation, what you should be bringing your kids to and where you should be focusing before you can even begin to think about regenerative agriculture is get to know your place. Get to know all of the plants, get to know the birds, get to know the animals and how everything relates in a symbiotic way. And get to know the historic ideal, how the indigenous people stewarded that land. And they lived in this balance where their actions created their own survival and the survival of all of the life that they depended on. So how can we then look at that historic ideal? So here where I live, it's grasslands. Grasslands are incredible. They cover 40% of the Earth's surface, and they have so much potential to draw down carbon because grasses, they continue to grow, especially perennial grasses. So when we enhance these grasslands, then we pull more carbon down from the atmosphere, we create more life, and we create nutrient-dense food for humans. So that's why I love grass-fed beef. I think people need to eat more grass-fed beef. And I see my role as a regenerative rancher similar to how nature functions, is that I move because nature moves. So I need to move with nature. So as a regenerative rancher, I move my animals. I move my herds of cattle through the grasslands. And in turn, those cattle move the grasses and all of those plants. They're trampling, they're biting, they're helping to create that germination of those seeds. They're fertilizing by spreading their manure. And then they move on, and those grasses grow, and all of that green leaf pulls down carbon through photosynthesis, and that then moves the soil. So that's really where that sweet spot is that by grazing in this way, we're producing more biodiversity above ground, which leads to biodiversity below ground. And the healthier the soil is, the healthier all of us are, the healthier our food is, and the more drought resilient our landscapes are, because all of that soil organic matter that is built when soil is covered, when those basic regenerative agriculture principles are followed, that holds more moisture. So we need to get away from those industrial agriculture models and start to ranch and farm in nature's image and bring more life. And it's possible. It's possible because what we're seeing on these rangelands is stunning. We're seeing so much carbon being drawn down. We're seeing an increase in native perennial bunch grasses. We're seeing an increase in threatened grassland birds. I was just out all day yesterday with the Audubon Society and looking at the grasslands are the solution for so many of these species that are holding on by a thread. And the groups like the Audubon Society are looking at grass-fed ranchers and saying, okay, your form of agriculture, of producing food, is not tilling the prairie. It's not contributing to monocultures of corn and soy. It's not releasing carbon in the atmosphere because the soil is being covered. It's not creating habitat loss. It's increasing habitat. And it's looking at how the indigenous people steward this land and mimicking as much as we can in a very humble way to start to regain those carbon stocks and that water storage that once existed in these grasslands. And so that's what really excites me about this day right now, this Earth Day, is that there's so much talk about regenerative agriculture. I've been on so many different panels, and it's real, and it gives us hope, and we can see certain certain examples where this does work, and if we scale this will work. It's going to take a lot of partnerships, but I do see a lot of hope. So please stay in touch. I'm really honored to be on this panel with all of you, and yeah, happy day, and let's make this the start of a really positive future where we can regenerate life with every action we take, and stop trying to tame the wild. Let's tend to the wild.
Wow. Danica, thank you. I could do 24 hours on just hearing you talk and about your passion. What I am hearing is this sensory immersion really brought you to wildlife, where wildlife became your teacher, and now you've become the teacher and are using these grasslands to produce a food product in a regenerative manner. And wow, that surely piques my curiosity. Thank you so much for sharing. I'd love to shift over to Andrea, somebody else who's deeply connected to nature, a biophiliac, a term referring to a human desire to commune with nature. We've spent some time up in the Italian Alps together, and I know you're an avid runner, you're a scientist, you've put really interesting sensors on people's heads as they've been eating and connecting and communing with nature. I'm curious what gives you hope, and what you're working on these days that you'd love to share on this wonderful Earth Day.
Yeah, so thank you. It's good to remember that days. So we had a lot of fun here in Italian Alps, and I would start thinking about really biophilia. Biophilia is the passion or the interest that we has about life in general. I mean, plants, trees, animals, other humans. So it's a sort of instinct that everyone has. So inside of us, there is something that is evolved in these ages that connect us to everything. And when I mean everything, is really everything, because we are living in a very complex era. And today, more than in other periods of life, we have the possibility to embrace or try to understand this kind of complexity. So humans are little dots in this little world in the universe, but we are all connected to everything. So the question is how we can understand what is our role in this story, how we can understand what are the connection between us and planet Earth, or the nature in general, or how many tools we have to try to understand that. So we started 15 years ago by trying to understanding humans. It's not easy, definitely not easy. That's because humans are super complex machine, even our brains. But we started using EEG devices. So they are neuroimaging tools that through the soul sensors that are placed on your scalp, we can see the communication of your neurons, so your thoughts, your emotions, your brain processes. But the big question is not just what kind of processing are running in your brain when you are trying something or eating some food or doing sports activity, but what are really the features that affects your brain? What are really the context? Is the context matter? Yes. How is the relationship between a specific environment, features, and your reaction? Can we try to understand what is this kind of connection? So I started, for example, really some years ago by using stupid data loggers measuring humidity, light, temperature, and everything just by hanging in my hands, trying to understand if the variation of some of these measurements affects humans' reaction in a specific condition, and given by time, today we have the possibility by using these kind of devices to measure not just your brain's reaction, but try to understand how the context, how the environment are going to affect your brain, and specifically on the topic, how nature benefits your brain, how you can, for some ways, be in connection with that. So we started 3 years ago, just for research, by measuring people while they are doing something. Okay, no, sorry, I saw a question in the chat. Okay, that's fine. Is everything okay?
You're a little choppy for me. I don't know if there's any way to get closer to your router. I find your work fascinating, and I'd love to have a clearer way to hear it.
Is that fine for the others? Okay, I can go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. If there's anything you can do to close some windows to maybe get a better signal, maybe would be the best thing to do.
Oh, God.
Apologies for the technical difficulties here. Andrea, now you're muted, by the way. Let's unmute you. There we go.
Can you hear me now? Yes, sorry, guys. Yeah, no, I'm saying that living in the woods is funny and good for your health, but it's not for internet connection, probably. So sorry about that, if you can hear me in some points. But anyhow, we were just by trying to understand the complexity and how we can measure that. So we started to record group of people that come out and stay in nature. We've done in different places, not just here in Italy, but even, okay, that's fine. Not just here in Italy, but even in other places. So we've done in Madagascar, we've been in Kenya, in Asia, in North America, and even in California too. And for example, when we've been in Madagascar, we measure people while they were in the forest, a non-anthropized forest, so a very wild place. We observed that people, after the 60 minutes, so in the first part of the journey, they are really scared. In some points, their brain are wondering, okay, what's gonna happen? Is something that are gonna kill me, beat me, or everything? But after 1 hour, so 60 minutes, this kind of cognitive workload or overload collapsed, and the brain started saying, okay, you are at home now. There is nothing that are gonna scare you so long. So you can start breathe, you can start to appreciate this kind of environment, and the engagement and the relaxing skyrocketing, going up incredibly faster. So after 1 hour, we call it totally adaptive to a very wide place, like a forest with snakes and everything. So this is really fascinating because it means that our brain, our machines are totally connected, even with these ancient roots and ancient environments. So we starting to on this lane to try to say, okay, let us see what's really happening. People is going into nature, so even other wild places, and we try to analyze a specific kind of intelligence of the people. That's because they have multiple shades of intelligence. We have one that is the naturalistic intelligence. So it's your capability to be not just fascinated, but in contact and to treat the naturalistic things. So to appreciate nature in general. Not all of us are in contact with this kind of intelligence. So we need to educate or try to understand people, how they can be in contact and educated to be in contact with nature. So one, as Donica said, probably curiosity is the first stages of this kind of journey. So we need to put people in contact with nature. That's because the curiosity needs to the knowledge. So once I'm in contact with something which is unknown to me, I start wondering and asking to myself, okay, what kind of feature is that one? What kind of plant? What kind of tree? What kind of benefit? Or what kind of feeling is that one that is rising into me while I walk in this kind of woods? And you can't love or take care about something that you don't know. So if you want that people are in contact and try to keep and preserving this planet, we need to put the people in contact with nature. So once they know something, probably start to arise into you the feeling to protect and to love something. So our job today is to use our tools to, one, understand the benefits that connect and comes from nature to human beings, and use this kind of tool to gently nudge the people to be in contact with nature, to be outside, by explaining what kind of benefits they have, stay in contact with nature. But more than this, to use this data to policymakers, governments, and everyone that today need to take decisions. Today they need data. They need very reliable and solid data to take decisions. If I'm going to invest such money today, it's better if I take one decision that go into the direction to one of the planet, the second to help the people. So today our journey is try to working to create this super large matrix of data, this super large database of human beings and nature, and try by using this kind of data to be predictive and go into this direction. Is there some questions? Yes.
I'm hoping that this is coming through better for the recording than it is for me. Maybe it's partially my audio, but
I'm understanding Andrea just fine. I'm not having any issues on my end. Yeah.
Great.
Maybe can nice. I chime in a little bit?
Please do.
Okay.
Oh yeah, sure.
Andrea, I think what you're doing is really cool, and I think about COVID and how that caused, I think, everyone to really appreciate getting access to the outdoors and the greenery much, much more, including government officials, right? And that we talk about the nature deficit disorder, and I think that I'm actually Donica's neighbor in the little town of Pescadero, California, and I'm sure she would feel the same, that we had access to tons of land where we could be by ourselves. We didn't even have to wear masks because 6 feet. We didn't have to worry about social distancing because we have more animals than humans where we live, and I think that's really important. I wanted to say something about Donica's biophiliac kids, because she raises her kids in a very natural environment, and she's got these wonderful kids that they're full of purity and positivity and passion, and you can see that benefit of them having access to the outdoors and the way that Donica and her husband Eric raise those kids out in nature and the benefits that they see from that.
Yeah.
So yeah. I had one more thought. Go ahead, Andrea.
No, yeah, saying I had the pleasure to be in Donica's ranch last year. We've been guests even for dinner. They didn't make me work, so it's nice. But I encountered even the kids and even the atmosphere, as you said. You can appreciate directly, but just by looking at the guys, the benefits that they had to be in contact with nature and has this kind of lifestyle. So when you say that people after COVID, they feel instinctively to go outside, they stay in nature, is that because probably they know that going in nature is the best way to heal, best way to try to gently shut up some kind of thoughts, to shut up some kind of feelings, but they didn't know probably how to be in contact really or deeply with nature. So it's a good tentative reaction, but we probably today we need to lead the people to go more out, to discover more, to treat more with nature. So it's good because you saw that people instinctively go out, but probably the largest part of them, they didn't appreciate totally the real benefits to stay out in nature. I wouldn't say they are not good for that. They are totally good. They had good time and so forth, but probably they didn't understand completely what kind of benefit, what kind of, if you do regularity, this kind of connection is going for you. So that's the role a company like us and guys like you to say, okay, guys, it's good. Let me explain what you can do more for that, and why for that reason is this kind of benefit.
Yeah. So Tim, you wanted me to talk a little bit about nature tech, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to respond briefly, though, to Andrea, one of the things I find so fascinating, it feels like you're quantifying the quality of nature and qualifying the value of a forest in place, which is a kind of really interesting development, because we can say a forest cut down in wood is so much money, but you're now being able to say that it has tremendous value to us as it sits in nature. So that gives me a tremendous amount of hope and is just fascinating work. So thank you so much for sharing what you're up to. And yes, Rob Trice, I know you could talk for hours about this type of stuff. So please bring it home for us. Tell us a little bit about what gives you hope as far as the future of food pertaining to nature tech.
Well, on the nature tech, the term itself could be a bunch of different things, and kind of link this back to Andrea a little bit. Donica, I don't know if you know, but we have 820 visiting goats. And so this weekend I had to help out with the goats. And as weird as this sounds, there is a calm, this, Donica, hanging out with the animals. So being amongst a herd of 820 goats, I still don't understand goat yoga, but hanging out with a herd of goats, there's a calmness that comes to it. It's the same thing with the cows. It's just when you're out there, I think maybe, Andrea, if you get over that initial fear of what the animals are and you understand that you can coexist with them and there's a mutually beneficial relationship. So that's kind of tying into Andrea, but then also the reason that we have those goats there is that they are nature tech, in the sense that last year we had a fire that came within 3/4 of a mile of the ranch, and we're actually using those goats for fire mitigation purposes. So we're sending them up into the brush that we have to clear them out, clear out that brush, and help prevent any potential forest fires reaching that ranch. So that's kind of one. That's probably not exactly what, when you wanted me to talk about nature tech, goats is probably not what you had in mind, Tim. So maybe what I can do is just give a little bit of background on myself and my focus areas. So the community that Donna and I live in is 45 minutes west of Silicon Valley. My background is about 15 years in mobile internet telecom venture capital. And I actually met Tim at an event 8 years ago called Hack Meat. And it was a hackathon that my wife dragged me to look at how we could use technology for beef. And long story short, my team actually ended up winning that hackathon. We won $5,000 and a Carhartt jacket and a box of meat. And I ended up with my picture on the cover of Modern Farmer magazine, somewhere my parents never thought they would ever see me. But I kind of looked at it, and I looked at the challenges of food. I looked at the fact that Uber had disrupted transportation, Airbnb had disrupted lodging. Food and agriculture is 5 to 10% of the world's economy. Incredibly important. I don't know a single person who doesn't want to eat. And yet it's got tremendous challenges that we need to go solve. And so at that point, 8 years ago, Silicon Valley's IT innovation ecosystem hadn't really embraced food and ag tech. And so, Tim, you came to our very first conference that we had for the Mixing Bowl, which was in 2014, 7 years ago. And I put a slide on the screen, and I said the Mixing Bowl's purpose is fourfold. There's 4 ways that we're going to solve the challenges of food and ag. First, we need to see the issues. Second, we need to see the solutions. Third, we need to solve the problems. And fourth, we need to scale the solutions. And now if we fast forward, the thing that gives me hope and excitement is that, as opposed to 7 or 8 years ago, where we didn't even know what agri-food tech was, and we hardly had any entrepreneurs, any funding in the space, now you look and we've got arguably too many entrepreneurs moving into food tech and ag tech. We've got a ton of dollars stepping in globally. Like, this space has lit up. It's become a thing. Donica was featured in a movie called Kiss the Ground. Whoever would have thought that soil would be trending on Netflix? right? This has all happened in the last 7 years. Soil is sexy. And so there's been a great awareness of the challenges that we have and the opportunities. And so where I look at my role is I want to bring that technology, and particularly that data technology, to inform us on those natural solutions and how can we actually implement them better. And so earlier this year, we released a report that we did alongside the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers in Action, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and our friends at the Croatan Institute to look at how we could actually scale up climate smart ag practices for soil health in the United States, ultimately to get U.S. agriculture to become a net positive carbon sink. And so we looked at how we could really help farmers and ranchers embrace 6 key practices and use technology and finance to transition, to embrace and transition on these practices. So the 6 practices we looked at were no and reduced tillage, cover cropping, crop rotation, compost, managed grazing, and integrated crop and livestock systems. And the other thing that we did, we looked at the fact that, when we did these interviews for farmers and ranchers, we kept hearing this term, I took a leap of faith. For whatever reason, I took a leap of faith and I embraced these practices. And what we want to do is use technology and finance to make that leap of faith a shorter hop. And so that ultimately farmers can know that they've got the technical advice to go implement these practices successfully, and that there will be economic reward for embracing these practices. And I know, for instance, Tim, our mutual friend, Yitro Paul and Sarah Roversi started the Food for Climate League, which is also undertaking an important element, which is making sure that consumers have the narratives and the stories related to climate smart foods, so that they do buy those regenerative food products that are coming out, that they're willing to pay for the full cost of food. They're willing to pay a premium for those products being produced by farmers and ranchers that are being done according to the principles of climate smart, soil centric agriculture. So that was the goal that we undertook. There are definitely challenges, but I think at the end of the day, I remain hopeful. What we also did in this report is we outlined the agricultural capital flows in the United States. There's a $972 billion that flows through almost $1 trillion that goes through the agricultural system in the United States every year. Only about 20 billion of that is US government. So if you think about supplier agreements, you think about insurance, you think about banking, equipment purchases, all of this is flowing through the ag system in the United States. How can we look to grow the pie? How can we assign more of that money to climate smart agricultural practices? We can do this. The science behind these practices is valid. USDA, scientists all over the world know that these practices work. Now the role that the data can play, though, is, the practices that my wife at Tomcat Ranch or Donica will do it on the Markey Gyre where they're grazing, the way that you're going to manage those adaptive rotational grazing plans is going to be different than how you might do it in Georgia. But it might be more similar to the way that you would do it in Western Australia, because we're lacking water. Particularly this year, we're about 50% of our normal average rainfall. Georgia, they may have plenty of water. And so we need to make sure that the producers like Donica have the right information so that they know how best to implement, whether that is where to graze, how to graze, what to plant, and so forth. So how can we actually use the data to inform people? Right now, there are a ton of things like Facebook groups, Understanding Ag, where farmers are connecting. I don't know how anybody did agriculture before YouTube. This is a use of technology right now, but we can do much better. And we can really use this big data, AI, machine learning, all of those buzzwords to better understand how things are being done, collect those stories of where we're seeing success or failure, the amount of birds that you're seeing in Donica's place versus our place. How can we determine, is the planting of a certain perennial crop bringing more of a certain bird back more frequently? better water capture, water quality, carbon capture, all of these things. We have the capacity to harness all of the technology we have over the hill in Silicon Valley to benefit food and agriculture. So I think maybe just in summation, if I think about why I have hope on this Earth Day, while the challenges are great, the opportunities are great as well. We've got the resources. This is global. This is a ton of entrepreneurs. We've had the entire conservation community really focusing on food and ag. That was not the case 7 years ago. I think there's a better recognition of the value of working landscapes as another nature tech climate solution that is coming along. We have Wall Street that has now got, 1/3 of institutional money in the United States is related to SDG or ESG now. And so you're looking at the application of big Wall Street money to projects that meet their financial goals, but that are also aligned with the SDG goals. And so all of these things, this is what gives me great hope. And of course, we've got climate change happening. And so there's a need for us all to focus on this together.
I think you did a really great job at tying that up there, Rob. Yeah, and actually, one of the Rob-isms comes to mind, and it actually brings me back to my own origin story of getting into food. Was coming from getting food poisoning from fast food, from that old system, that extractive nutrient void system. And that's what really inspired my own journey into the slow food movement and then into the entrepreneurial world. But there wasn't that entrepreneurial ecosystem when we met 10 years ago. Now, as you said, there is a tremendous amount of entrepreneurs out there. There's a tremendous amount of information on what the challenges and the opportunities are. There's a lot of solutions that are finally being funded. But the future of food, to borrow your term, I like, what you just said, it's fast, and it's fast flows of information, of feedback systems, of getting to understand, what really is the value, what is working, but it's really going back to the basics. It's pairing slow food with technology. And I kind of want to just wrap up by saying that the thing that gives me the most hope is, first of all, you guys, and it is the other folks that are watching around the world that are tapped into the Future Food Network. We have this global community beyond borders, all around the world that actively care about this. And also what you mentioned, this unifying force of climate change. And I work a lot with big food companies, trying to get them to care. And the one thing that gives them that impetus to care is the understanding that if they want to work with leaders like yourselves in the future, if they want to succeed, they're going to have to care about these issues. Collectively, we all have to care about climate change in order to survive. So it's our grand unifying force, and it couldn't be more appropriate that we're looking at all these solutions that you're stewarding and shepherding, Donegal, and the technology that you're bringing to the world, and then the network that you're building and the funding that you're doing, Rob. So thank you guys so much for your time, for the opportunity to kind of learn and share with everybody around the world on the things that are giving you hope. And I look forward to seeing the rest of these talks around the world. Thank you to everybody at Future Food for setting this up, and can't wait to see this again next year.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Cheers. Happy Earth Day.
Bye. Ciao.
Ciao.